All right, fire the signals, officer. Can you hear me now? Okay, look, it is truly a pleasure and an honor to be here with you all. You know, when I think about the American dream, I think about a young man born in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, who back in 1979 got on I-75 and came north here to the University of Tennessee. And the reason why I chose the University of Tennessee, one thing, because we all knew they had one of the best ROTC programs in the nation. But it was because as a young high school and middle school football player, there was a guy, number 7, who was the first black quarterback in the Southeastern Conference. And I knew that if a school like this could create that type of opportunity, my dad said that's the type of school that you should go to. And so when he got off I-75 and I pulled up and unloaded my bags up to the zoo, Hess Hall, 7th floor. Okay. How many Hess Hall Zoo people we got here? None? Hey! Right. It was the beginning of what I can tell you is an incredible life. You know, when I was walking over here to this place, and the place where we used to play basketball, they tore down, Jimmy. You know, there's no Stokely Athletic Center anymore. But the stadium over here, this entire north end was still open. I remember the time when we upset Notre Dame and beat them here. I remember the time after 12 years we upset Alabama. That was Bear Bryant's last coaching season. So I have some great memories up here. And the greatest thing was, of course, the day that I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. To have my father, who was a World War II veteran, a corporal, pin on my gold bars. A mother who worked as a civilian servant for the 6th Marine Corps District in Atlanta. Because growing up, they asked one thing of me. When we sat down on the steps at 651 Kennesaw Avenue, we want you to be the first officer in our family. Because my older brother had been a Lance Corporal in Vietnam. And so here I am, back here on Rocky Top, the place that gave me the opportunity, as the Army once said, sir, to be all that I could be, First Sergeant. And thank you so much for having me here. What I want to talk about, I just wrote it down right here. Because amazingly, when I showed up here in 1979, as George Santayana said, and I'll kind of paraphrase this, those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. When I showed up here in 1979, there were 52 American hostages in Iran. When I showed up here in 1979, there was a thing called the Iranian Islamic Revolution. The Shah of Iran had been deposed, and the Ayatollah Khomeini had come in. When I showed up here in 1979, the Soviet Union had invaded a place called Afghanistan. And little did I know, in 2005, that I would be landing in Kabul, Afghanistan, to train the Afghan National Army. And so when I think about the fact that I arrived in Tennessee in 1979, and here I stand today in 2015, and we still see those same issues. We still see a lot of those same trends. We still see the problems that began in 79 happening and affecting the future of those of you who are sitting here at the University of Tennessee now. When I graduated in 1983, that was the exact same year. At the end of that year in October, were 234 Marines, sailors, and soldiers lost their lives in the Beirut bombing. That was done by a group that was supported by Iran called Hezbollah. Now when I left out of here, we had a huge, incredible army that was always focused on the Soviet Union. I remember doing combat patrols along the Bulgarian border. I remember the first time as a young officer in 1985 when I went through Checkpoint Charlie. Some of you may know about this movie that is out called Bridge of Spies. And I went over into East Berlin and I got to see what it was like behind that wall. You know, I studied it here at the University of Tennessee because I graduated with a degree in political science. But to walk the streets of East Berlin and to see Soviet officers and to look into the faces of the people of East Berlin and see no semblance of hope, the lack of freedom, the lack of opportunity. But when you looked up to every single building there, every single building, the antennas were pointed back toward West Berlin. And eventually, during the time I was in the military, that wall came down. Now, a lot of people say we did not need a strong military force, and that's what we want to talk about tonight, is how do we protect and make sure that we guarantee freedom for future generations? Because the most important responsibility, the number one responsibility of the federal government is to provide for the common defense. But if you study the history of the United States of America, it always seems that we believe that when an enemy is gone away, then that there will be peace in our time. And if you all remember 1938, when Neville Chamberlain traveled to Germany, he came back with a signed document, signed by himself and Adolf Hitler. He made that declaration that there will be peace in our time. You know, John F. Kennedy had a great quote. He said, "The absence of war is not peace." And if those of you here, political science students, if you've ever read the great book by Machiavelli, The Prince, you'll understand that people are always looking for that opportunity that they have to become a strong man. And that is the world that we're living in today. See, as we continued on and we drew down our military force, I remember going to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, open desert warfare. Incredible. We won in 96 hours. But the message that that sent to everyone else is that you don't want to face the United States military in open desert warfare. You don't want to play up to the strengths that we have. And see, in 1980, when the new president came in, Ronald Reagan, one of the first things he did was to modernize the United States military. Instead of the old M60 tank, we got the new M1 Abrams. Instead of the old M113 armored personnel carrier, we got the M2 Bradley. Instead of the old artillery systems that we had upgraded 105, the self-propelled 155s. We had this thing called a multiple launch rocket system. Instead of the old Apache helicopter, the old Cobra helicopters, we got the new Apache helicopters. What we put in the field in Desert Shield, Desert Storm when I was a young captain was an incredible military machine and armada. And I remember after everything was over, the combat operations, I was a captain in the 1st Infantry Division. And sitting there at night, because the only thing we could do sitting at night was to watch the oil well fires burn. And we asked ourselves, how long would it be before we had to come back? Because there were 2 Iranian Republican Guard divisions that were just ahead of us. And we were given the orders to cease fire, freeze, stop, hold your position. We allowed the enemy to stay on the battlefield. If I could impart one lesson to you about strategy, is that when you commit your military, you must commit them to defeat the enemy on the battlefield. If you fight half-measure warfare, you're going to get residual effects. And you see what has happened in Korea with the DMZ, you see what happened in Vietnam, you see what has happened with Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And so therefore, in 2003, now as a lieutenant colonel, commander of the battalion in the 4th Infantry Division, I returned back to Iraq. Completely, totally different battlefield. No one was going to take us on in the open desert. They were going to draw us in and fight in a way that we had not fought, really, truthfully, since Vietnam and Way City. If you don't know what Way City was, go back and study that. It was a major urban operation for the United States Marines. And we had to learn a lot. We had to do a lot of things on the fly. But that's how great the men and women of this United States military are. That they can adapt, they can adjust, and they can try to provide to this great nation success on the battlefield. Now this will be probably the only really political thing that I will say tonight. But when you decide the campaign promises and your rigid ideology is more important than the reality on the ground and a sound national security strategic policy, then you will make the mistake that the United States of America made in Iraq by withdrawing all of our combat troops. And therefore you left the void. And if you know physics, nature despises and abhors a void. Something will fill that void. And now we see what has happened. So in 1979, when I showed up here, and the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, now, how many freshmen do we have here? It's 2015, and the Soviet Union has gone into Syria. Now, there are some people that will say, you know, it'll be the exact same thing that happened for them. They'll be defeated. They'll run away in embarrassment. As Lee Corso would say on, ESPN college football, not so fast, my friend. I'm sorry, I don't have a pencil, but that's what he was saying. The difference is that when the Soviet Union went into Afghanistan, they did not have any allies. But if you look at the battlefield, you look at the news reports today, the Soviet Union is dropping bombs with Syrian army forces on the ground, with Iranian forces on the ground, with Hezbollah, remember that group in 1983 that bombed the Beirut barracks, they're on the ground fighting as well. They have a coalition that they're putting together. So ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in almost 40 years, Russia has reasserted itself into the Middle East. But not just the Middle East, but also they took the Crimea. And why is it so important to understand why Vladimir Putin took the Crimea? Because Monday of that week, the former Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel, made an announcement that we were going to draw down the United States Army and we're going to cancel what is probably the best close air support system platform that we've had since the P-51 in World War II, and that's the A-10. That announcement was Monday. Friday that week, Russian Special Operations Forces, not dressed in their uniforms, dressed as paramilitary, went in and took the Crimea. And now they have taken a good portion of eastern Ukraine. And if you are living in the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, you have to be very concerned. Because Vladimir Putin has just said that he is interested in protecting all of the ethnic Russians that are in these border states. Now, when was the last time you heard someone say something like that? It was between 1936 and 1939 when Adolf Hitler said, "Give me the Sudetenland, because I need to protect ethnic Germans." He invaded into Czechoslovakia because he needed to protect ethnic Germans. And that is when Neville Chamberlain went to sign a piece of paper. No different from the piece of paper that we have signed with the Iranians today, who, oh, by the way, in the last week, have tested a new ballistic missile system, which, according to the United Nations weapons ban, they're not supposed to be able to test new ballistic missile systems. And furthermore, General Qasem Soleimani, who is the head of the Quds Force, and the Quds Force, who is listed as a terrorist organization, General Soleimani is not supposed to be traveling outside of Iran. 4 days after the agreement was signed, he was in Russia talking to the defense minister and also to Vladimir Putin, and who is operating in Syria with the Russians flying their close air support, the Quds Force. Now, why does this matter? Because young men, young women, when I sat here in 1979, even though we're starting to modernize our force, we had an incredible force. And President Reagan operated under a mantra called peace through strength. To have a military that was so strong that it would be a deterrent force. So when I came into the military, that was the restored military we had after the Carter administration. But let me tell you about your military today. The United States Army is at 1939 levels. The United States Marine Corps is at World War I levels. The United States Navy is at 1917 levels. During the Reagan administration, approximately 575 surface warships. Today, about 283. The goal is to take the Navy somewhere down to about 230 warships, surface warships. You can go all the way back to the times of the ancient Phoenicians, and you will know that a country really does expand its power over the seas by maritime forces, not by land forces, but by maritime forces. If you don't believe it, study the Barbary Wars of the United States of America. America as a young nation was being picked on by the Barbary powers of North Africa because we didn't have a navy. And it was Thomas Jefferson that said we need to have 4 ships that can transit over to the Mediterranean. The Barbary Wars were our first foreign combat engagement, and it was a maritime engagement. The United States Air Force. Since we created the modern United States Air Force out of the Army Air Corps, it is now the oldest and the smallest fleet since we had that Air Force. And furthermore, it's been announced that we will have another 40,000 troops cut from the active duty United States Army. yourselves as you sit here at the University of Tennessee, what message does that send to the despots, dictators, theocrats, and autocrats all across the world right now? There's a reason why Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority is doing what they're doing today. Because they don't feel that there's a United States of America that will stand up to them in support of Israel. There's a reason why Russia, when the President of the United States of America was in Alaska, they were conducting military operations and reopening military bases in the Arctic Circle. There's a reason why China had 5 to 6 Navy warships off the coast of Alaska when the President of the United States of America was visiting Alaska. There's oil and natural gas resources in the Arctic Circle. And they will lay claim by sheer military prowess and strength and ability to be able to secure those resources. Let me explain something to you. In 22 years, I deployed into 3 different combat zones. I have a wife, I have 2 daughters. There's nothing more difficult than looking your wife in the eye, looking your children in the eye, and telling them goodbye. If I could have gone an entire 22 years of service and never have to deploy and fight for my country, that would have been fine. But when my country called upon me, I knew the mission that I had to do was to provide freedom and a blanket through my service, my sacrifice, and my commitment. That's why this woman sits here today as a Gold Star mother, because she understands that commitment that was made. America can only be great if we secure the next generation of freedom. My concern right now is we're not doing that. My concern right now is that so many people are listening to the sweet honey that is poured into their ears. You can be given this and you can be given that. But the bottom line is that you don't recognize and understand that there are enemies out there. You don't recognize and understand that you must exude strength and might to some people because that's all that they understand. In 1994, President Bill Clinton signed a nuclear agreement with North Korea. And North Korea supposedly was not going to have a nuclear weapon. 12 years later, North Korea tested its first nuclear device. And if you were paying attention to the news just last week, when the new president of South Korea stood there with President Obama, they were talking about what they can try to do to prevent North Korea from using nuclear weapons. Why would we go into an agreement with a country that has the blood of Americans on their hands? A country that, when I showed up here as a freshman, had 52 Americans hostage. Today, they still have Americans hostage. As a matter of fact, a week and a half ago, they convicted Jason Reznian, a Washington Post reporter, of espionage. A Christian minister, Saeed Abedini. A former Marine, Amir Hekmati. A former CIA operative, Robert Levinson, are still sitting and languishing in prison in Iran. I told you in 1983 about the Beirut Barracks bombing. If you go back and you read about the explosive force penetrators, those are a new form of very lethal IEDs that have been produced in Iran. They're responsible for about 30% of the deaths of American servicemen and women in Iraq. Why would we go into an agreement with a country like that? Why would we say we're going to unfreeze $150 billion of assets to a country like that? That's what I need you all sitting here on the campus of the University of Tennessee to think about. I didn't think about it in 1979 when I was a freshman. But it hit me like a cold wind when all of a sudden I found myself in places that I'd never heard of before. We have to fix these things, we have to correct these things, and it comes from having a military that has a capability and a capacity to provide a deterrent to the enemies of this great nation. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. Oh, and I forgot those other guys. Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Al-Nusra, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade, Al-Quds Martyrs Brigade, ISIS, the Nusra Front, the Taliban, Jamaat al-Islami, Abu Sayyaf, then there's about another 5 or 6. But as you can see, I got gray hair, I'm getting old, I can't remember too many of those. But if we don't confront this new militant Islamic jihadism, then unfortunately we made a decision back in 1978 and 79 to have a resurgence because we allowed a theocrat, a religious leader, to take over the nation. That was Iran. This is what we have today. Our country has to make better decisions for your future. Because the last thing I want to see happen is some 32 years from now, one of you that's raised your hand as a freshman will be standing here before a crowd of students at the University of Tennessee and talking about Iran, talking about Russia, talking about China, and talking about the exact same things all over again. I don't care about Republican or Democrat. I took an oath to a Constitution. And the embodiment of that Constitution is each and every one of us. A bullet does not care if you have an R or a D after your name. When the planes flew into the World Trade Towers, those guys did not ask how many Republicans are in this tower, how many Democrats are in that tower. All they knew was that we're attacking America. And I'm telling you right now, I have never been so concerned about the security situation of this globe and for this country than I am right now. Now, some of y'all say, "God, I mean, can you give us some good news?" I think we're going to beat Alabama.
Come on.
We used to have a tradition when I was here. I don't know if it's still going on, but this used to be called Buck Family Week. This is why I have to talk to you young people. Because I have 2 daughters, 22 and 18. I have to turn over a better America, a more safe and secure America to you all than what was left for me. And what keeps me awake at night is that maybe, just maybe, we might not be able to make that happen. No one would have ever thought airplanes would fly into buildings in America, but it happened. We have been at a perpetual state of war for quite some time. And we can bury our heads in the sand, we can cut our military, we can talk about all the other things that we want to do, but if we don't keep you safe, then what's the use of the education that you're getting here at the University of Tennessee? That's my concern. I do believe that the greater days for America are ahead of us. I think that we are challenged and we are being pushed into a corner. And as you know, we're just a bunch of resilient old knuckleheads, and we'll figure out a way to come out and we will fight. There's no country that has done or achieved what we have achieved in 239 years. And if you can't find pride in that, then I don't know what you will find pride in. You have a title that so many people have fought for and bled for. So many people have come to these shores to have. And that title is America. And I can tell you something else, and I'm pretty proud of it. The title that I have, the Tennessee Volunteer. Because when you think about what that name means, it means men who left this state to go and fight for freedom. And I'll close on this note. I just moved out to Dallas, Texas at the beginning of this year. And I take great pride in telling Texans one simple thing about history. Santa Anna surrendered to a Tennessean. God bless you all.